This is Acadiana's Morning News. Brandon Comeaux, Rob Kirkpatrick here this morning. Joining us in the studio, Captain Clay Higgins, candidate for the 3rd Congressional District seat. Captain Higgins, what's going on, sir?
Good morning, Brandon. It's so great to be here.
Well, thank you so much for joining us. Now, how are things going on the campaign trail?
Well, I'm told by the experts that surround me that they're going real well, Brandon.
Mm-hmm.
You know me pretty good. I'm not a politician. I'm a patriot. So this is a steep learning curve for me involved in something like this, but we seem to be doing very well. There was an independent poll released last week that's really showed it to be a two-man race, so we're comfortable with that.
Well, let's talk a little bit about that poll because you came in at 18%. Scott Angelle, the projected frontrunner in that poll. And so, it's one thing for people to encourage you to get into a race and say, well, hey, you're going to have my support. But then to actually see it come out in numbers form, what was your reaction when you saw the poll?
I was humbled by that. Again, Brandon, as a man with the kind of background that I have, I'm certainly not a politician. So, I've always been humbled and uplifted by the support that the people of Louisiana and America have shown me, and to see it in a poll like that, we just announced, a month ago,
yeah.
and that independent poll by the Trafalgar Group seemed to reinforce what the people of the 3rd District and the state of Louisiana had encouraged me to believe that I would be a strong competitor in this race if I got into it.
So here's a question that I've wanted to ask you for a while. 3rd Congressional District. Why the 3rd Congressional District and not the 4th? Because as we know, the 4th Congressional District includes parts of St. Landry Parish. You obviously served St. Landry Parish for quite a while. So what was it about the 3rd Congressional District? Why is the reason that you chose to run in the 3rd Congressional District as opposed to the 4th, which has much less candidates than this crowded field in the 3rd Congressional District?
Right, Brandon, it's a good question. We chose, when I say we, I mean my wife and I and my advisors, we chose the 3rd District not because it would be the easiest, competition, certainly, perhaps the most difficult between the 3rd, the 4th, and the 5th, but we chose the 3rd for two real reasons that tie together with what our founding fathers envisioned congressional representation should be. One, the Congress in Washington is divided in two houses, the House of Representatives and the Senate. Mm-hmm. The Founding Fathers envisioned the House of Representatives and congressmen to be working class folk, which is why it's a 2-year term and was envisioned as part-time so that farmers and merchants and sailors and soldiers and ranchers and cowboys could take some time off of their work and their endeavors at home a few months at a time, couple months at a time for just a couple of years to go and represent their country as congressmen in Washington. Well, one of the main reasons that we chose the 3rd District is I looked at the races, and to me, all due respect for Mr. Angelle represented the most easily identified consummate career politician. And although, Brandon, I don't resemble the kind of man that we've been sending to Washington to represent us in Congress, I definitely resemble what the Founding Fathers envisioned should be the kind of American to represent common folk in Washington. So that was one reason. Mm-hmm. It was because of the very easily identified essence of the projected front runner as a career politician in the 3rd District. The other reason ties together as well. St. Landry Parish was carved up into 3 districts, and the Founding Fathers envisioned, of course, district representation to be proportionate to population, but also based upon heritage and culture. Mm-hmm. And that just makes sense. St. Landry Parish associates, by heritage and culturally, more with Lafayette Parish and Iberia Parish, St. Martin Parish, Acadia Parish. The 3rd District much more represents the heritage and culture of St. Landry than our friends and fellow Americans and Louisiana residents in Shreveport and Monroe. Mm. So I just felt that the St. Landry Parish citizens should have a voice, although not necessarily carved up from their district, but based upon heritage and culture, of the people of St. Landry Parish are more associated with the 3rd District. So just let us hear.
You kind of feel like if you were able to win this election, you could represent both districts in essence.
Yeah, I don't really recognize the false divisions.
Mm-hmm.
You know, with all due respect for my fellow congressmen, when that time comes from the other districts, the point is, based upon what the Founding Fathers envisioned and just what makes common sense, the people of St. Landry Parish should be represented in the 3rd District. So that and to position myself against what I felt was the most clearly identified gentleman running, that's is known as a career politician and indeed is one. That's why we chose the 3rd District.
So speaking with Captain Clay Higgins on Acadiana's Morning News, and he's running for the 3rd Congressional District seat. Now, I'll get into a couple of issues here with you, because first of all, you mentioned career politicians. So here's a topic that gets debated often: term limits. Are you a believer in term limits?
No, I believe that constitutionally we have term limits. They're called elections, and I believe in wisdom. I believe in common sense. Mm-hmm. I believe that it's time for Americans to stand up and take our country back, and we do that election by election. I've never been a big believer in term limits. I believe that an experienced man carries a great deal of weight if it's good experience and patriotic experience.
Right.
Right? I mean, nobody would want an experienced arsonist for a roommate, right?
Yeah.
So it's the type of experience that I believe, we need to focus on, but that's where elections come in. If a fella's not doing the job right and representing the American people in the way that the Constitution determines we should, then he needs to be voted out of office. So that's a term limit I believe in.
Right now, big debate happening in Congress is gun control. I want to get your thoughts on this topic, as 4 competing gun control measures failed to move forward in the Senate on Monday. On Tuesday, Senator Susan Collins unveiled a proposal in the Senate which has a lot of bipartisan support. Basically, the legislation would give the Attorney General authority to ban gun sales to people on 2 terrorist watch lists, the no-fly list and the selectee list. However, in an attempt to address Republican concerns about infringing on Second Amendment rights, the legislation would provide a process to American citizens and residents to appeal a denial of a gun purchase. The senator says the bill would put the burden of proof on the government to show the individual is suspected of terrorism. And again, many senators on both sides of the aisle are backing this. They're saying it looks like it's going to get the 60 votes needed. As a congressman, you'd get to vote on measures like this. Is a bill necessary for what's happening right now, whether it's stopping certain people from getting guns, strengthening background checks, or anything else? And if so, what would it need to contain, a bill, for you to be able to vote for it?
Well, it's a complex issue, and one of the things that we struggle with as Americans in the 21st century is how do you respond to some of the violence that we're dealing with. Let me just share with you, Brandon, that I'll be 55 in August, partner, and I went to high school in the 70s in a rural school, and every vehicle in the parking lot almost was a pickup truck, and in almost every back glass was a rifle or a shotgun or both. And Brandon, nobody got shot. Mm-hmm. And now all of a sudden it's the gun's fault. It wasn't until the 60s that guns were regulated at all. Mm-hmm. Prior to that, just 50 years ago in our country, a child could buy a gun from any seller if daddy sent him with the money. So as a nation, I very much understand the pain and anguish and heartache and the desire to react and respond with more laws and more restrictions on our Second Amendment rights. However, regardless of the restrictions placed upon Second Amendment rights out of D.C., whether they be executive branch, executive orders, or bills passed by both houses of Congress and signed by the president that become federal law, restrictions on law-abiding citizens regarding Second Amendment rights is not going to stop killings in this country, partner. Mm-hmm. We certainly have violence that's being visited upon us that's reflective of the society that we live in. But gun-free zones are always the targets of terrorists and citizens. The club in Orlando was a gun-free zone. Chicago, Illinois has some of the most restrictive gun laws in the country, and Chicago is working on being a murder capital of the world. I mean, they got 200 murders, over 1,000 shootings this year, and that's a city where legal gun ownership is next to impossible. So, I would have to really carefully evaluate and prayerfully consider balance against the constitutional guidelines established by the Founding Fathers with the strict protection of Second Amendment rights. I'd have to really very carefully evaluate any bill that would introduce additional measures to restrict gun ownership of law-abiding, sane Americans. Mm-hmm. Now, the mentally ill and people on a terrorist watch list, this is an interesting question, because I think as a nation we've had a disgraceful record on how we deal with mental illness in America. That's something we need to address. And I don't think there's ever a time when a man on a terrorist watch list that's been rightfully placed there, which is the question you see. Mm-hmm. That's the real question. How does an American citizen get on a terrorist watch list? This has yet to be really explained to us. But if we can verify that somebody is likely a terrorist and they're being watched real carefully by the FBI, then I don't think they should be able to legally buy a gun, for God's sake. That's just common sense.
Now, as we're getting ready to wrap up with Captain Clay Higgins, sir, why should people vote for Captain Clay Higgins for Congress?
Well, if you're a patriot and you understand the conservative principles that have served our country so well, if you have compassion for your fellow man and you believe in caring for the poor, if you have constitutional leanings and you have a clear understanding of what the Founding Fathers envisioned and the greatness that our country can be, if you believe in a united America, if you have concerns of the direction that our country is heading in, because we keep sending career politicians to Washington, if you're a working class fella that, men and women of America frequently struggle, Brandon. I understand struggle. I know what it is to live paycheck to paycheck. I know what it is to take my earnings and consider whether I can buy groceries or pay the rent. Now that's the kind of connection that we should have from our politicians that represent us in Washington, certainly in the House of Representatives, because that's what the Founding Fathers envisioned. I am that guy in the 3rd District.
Now, Captain, before we let you go, want to make sure that we mention a couple charitable events that you're going to be a part of.
Yeah, thank you, Brandon. On July the 9th, we started an endeavor to establish a homeless shelter in St. Landry Parish about a year ago. We're doing pretty good with that, and we have a large fundraising bike ride, motorcycle gathering called Redemption Ride for the Homeless. You can register online and read about it at redemptionrideforthehomeless.com. It's going to be top shelf stuff at the Karen Crow Community Center. We have 3 bands. There'll be a live auction. It's a beautiful venue. We have great food coming. We have we have some of the top restaurants in the area are going to be serving food. Liz, the Gator Queen, is going to be out there with her food truck. That gathering is looking like it could be. If we have good weather, Brandon, it could be the largest bike run in the history of Acadiana. Wow. We could have 500-600 motorcycles out there, and that's all to raise money for the establishment of a homeless shelter in St. Landry Parish, badly needed. The other charitable event, believe it or not, partner, I'll be 55 in August, but I'll be boxing for charity on August the 13th in Monroe. At the Battle of the Badges, and I'm in training for that right now. I'm trying to get my old self in shape, and but it's all for charity. So, but I'll be boxing a fireman there. The fire chief up there is a wonderful man, highly respected, and a tough guy. Bro, I met him. He's one of those fellas who's like steel when you shake his hand. So, I'm gonna represent the police departments, and it's blue versus red. is Cops versus Firemen. It's all for charity. That's on August the 13th in Monroe. There's an 8,000-person venue, and it looks like we're going to sell out.
Wow. Captain Clay Higgins joining us on the show this morning, sir. Thank you so much for taking some time with us.
Brandon, God bless you, man. Thank you for having me.